Hello friends, and welcome once again to Cooking Homemade with Jill. Today we're going to be making some Tuscan bread. And again, it's a recipe I've never made before, so another adventure into cooking. I do this on purpose because frankly, who wants to watch somebody make chocolate chip cookies or brownies? I think we can all handle those kinds of things. So I think it's really kind of fun and interesting if if you try new things, and even if it's a total flop and failure, you learn something. You're never going to learn anything making the same old stuff over and over and over again, and it's really pretty boring. So I have made bread since I was, in my 20s and first married. And, it was it's one of the persistent memories I have of going to my grandmother's house when I was a kid. Whenever you walked in her door, you could smell the smell of homemade bread, and there's nothing like it. If you've never made bread, you really owe it to yourself. It's not that difficult. Just break it down step by step and try it out. It's a pretty safe medium to work in. I've had some flops, and we all do. So big deal. My standard these days, the older I get, is that, look, nobody died and the house didn't burn, hopefully, right? So if anything other than that happens, we're all good. So today, this is going to be a lengthy process because it's bread, and it takes some time to make bread, right? So I'm going to tilt the camera down, and let's get started. So here, if you can possibly see, it gets a little crowded in this little corner of my world. I've got my stand mixer going. Oh, long directions, which I will refer to multiple times, I'm sure. And so this recipe called for a sponge. Now, in this bowl is the sponge. And what is in here, which I started last night, it smells very yeasty. So this is made up of a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. Now, the yeast I use, I have to stop. For all of my life I'm up here. Hello. So for all of my life making bread, I always use Fleischmann's yeast, which is what you got in the grocery store. And it's fine. It's a fine, perfectly good yeast. But it wasn't until COVID hit and you couldn't find yeast anywhere, because all of a sudden everybody became bread makers, and everybody was making sourdough and needing to create a starter and all that jazz. I never did make sourdough. I don't think I could keep a starter alive, frankly. Sometime I'll tell you about my kombucha adventure. That was fun. I made kombucha, but nobody wanted to drink it except me. And, you got to keep making it, keep your SCOBY alive, but another story for another time. So anyway, during COVID, you couldn't get yeast, couldn't find it. So I looked up how to make yeast, and that was like, well, I'm not doing that. And so then, looking online, I found some yeast. And I'd never heard of it before, and I thought, yeast has got to be basically yeast, and it is. It is really basically yeast. But so what I got in the mail wasn't this one, but was a pound box of this yeast. And I don't know if you use Saf Instant, and there's a gold label or a red label, and they say one is good for something, one is good for the other. I find them interchangeable. But man alive, this was the best yeast I've ever used in my life. It was just amazing. So I get that now. And I'll put the link on where I get it. So try this yeast if you have not tried it. So anyway, back to my sponge. Oops, let me tilt you back down again. My sponge contains a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast, 2/3 of a cup of warm water at about 110 degrees, and 1 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour, not bread flour, all-purpose flour. And so I just combined that, and that has been sitting on my stove just all by itself overnight, and it has risen. You can see it has been all bubbly and stuff. So now we're ready to move on to actually constructing the bread. So in this bowl for the bread part, I have there's 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. The recipe calls for 3 3/4. But I've made bread before, and I find out that sometimes you have to add a little more. So I'm holding back 1/4 cup. I don't know if I should, but I can always add it in a little while. So right now there's 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour in here. And I have in here, I have another 1 1/4 teaspoons of that same yeast, right? And 1 1/3 cups of room temperature. This is just room temperature water. And when I was, I'm gonna crouch for you. When I was reading this recipe, they talked about Tuscan bread, and I thought it was odd that there was no salt in it. So as I'm reading the instructions, they mentioned a little bit about why Tuscan bread doesn't have any salt in it, and it's because that it's very bland without salt. So it's served with salty, like prosciutto and saltier cheeses, and that's how they kind of eat it apparently in Tuscany. So I debated with myself. Well, I thought, geez, I really don't like bland bread. But will it mess up the recipe if I put salt in it? I can't think so, because this is bread ingredients. I don't care what you call the bread. It's basic bread ingredients. So I have over here 3/4 teaspoon of salt. I think I'm going to add that to my bread. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get all this stuff going. So into my flour, I'm going to add the yeast and the salt. Why is it I can never remember to get my spatula? Hold on. Oh, it just is so annoying. And of course, it's across the room. And I'm going to put the water in, my room temperature water, yes, and this sponge, which has been sitting around waiting. Oh boy, does it look very spongy. Hope you can see that going in there. Woo! And there it goes, kerplop. Now, the fun begins. I was going to hand mix this a bit, but you know what? I don't think so. I'm going to just put, and it says, the directions say, sorry for all the jiggling. The directions say to put it in, combine it, and then knead it by hand for 10 minutes. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm an old lady, and I've made bread for so many years. I've abused my hands with crafts and quilting and knitting and stuff for so many years that they're done for. I've had to carpal tunnel releases, a thumb joint replacement. I'm not kneading anything anymore. Nothing. So I've got my trusty dough hook out here, and I do all my kneading on my beloved Kitchenaid. So we're going to start that off very slowly. Can you see that? Now this is not the big Kitchenaid mixer that you've got to crank up the thing to lift it up. I mean, really, I'm not a commercial kitchen, but so I can't do huge loaves of bread, but I can do this size. So this thing is going to continue to knead away for 10 minutes. And I don't think, I don't think that's like terribly interesting. So I'm gonna halt my camera right here, right now, and I'll be back in 10. Okay, everyone, we're back. This dough has been kneading away in my mixer for 10 minutes. So I'm going to stop it and move it out onto the lightly floured baking mat here. Nope. Hold the phone. As soon as I can get it off the stove hook. So there it is. That's what it looks like. And I ended up putting the other 1/4 cup of flour in it. Where's my bowl scraper? Because I really, in the end, I thought that's what it needed to do. So I'm just going to encourage it to come out of the bowl. You know, it's dough. It's got its own mind. There. And I am just going to flour my hand slightly and this and kind of just encourage it into a ball. I guess you're watching. Like I said, I don't need any more than I have to, because it does a number. I'll do this a little bit because it feels wonderful, actually. Even though I did put the salt in. See, this is the problem with this mat, it slides. All right, so this bowl has been greased. I'm gonna plop that in there and turn it over. So it's greased all over. And then I have some plastic wrap here that I've sprayed with some Pam cooking spray. And I'm just gonna put that on the top. And then, I'm sorry, I still have a cold I'm trying to get rid of. So I'm gonna put this in my oven, my stove, has a proofing feature. Oh God, I love it. So I'm gonna just put it in there. And the directions say to let it rise at, room temperature or whatever for about an hour until it doubles in bulk. So that will be our guide. But I often find that my proofing feature will proof something more quickly. So if you have a proofing option on your stove, just kind of keep an eye on it, because that's what I'm going to do. So we'll be back as soon as this thing has doubled in size. Hi everyone, back again. I've just taken my bread out of the proofer and preheated my oven to 450 degrees, and there it is. And now it says to slash the top so it doesn't rupture during baking. So I don't have one of those fancy things that do this for you. So I'm going to show you. I have it's a little serrated knife here, and I'm just going to gently cut across the top of this, breaking that, top crust that's kind of formed. And that's all I'm going to do. Now I'm going to put this in a 450 degree oven for 15 minutes. And the directions say to mist it with water 3 times during that 15-minute bake. After that, we're going to lower the temperature in the oven and cook it an additional amount of time. So I'm going to put it in, and we'll see what happens. So in 5 minutes, I will be back, actually, I think after the 15-minute period. And you know what? We'll be back after it finishes baking, and we can look at the finished product. Hang in there. See you in a bit. Hiya, we're back again. And here is the finished loaf of Tuscan bread. So, all right, I left you back when I put it in the oven, and it was going to bake 15 minutes at 450 degrees, spritzing it with water every 5 minutes. And then after 15 minutes, it was the oven was reduced to 400 degrees, and it baked an additional 25 to 30 minutes. Now my oven runs hot, so after 25 minutes, I checked it, and the recipe says if its temperature reads 200 degrees, then it's done. Now I have a digital instant read thermometer. If you don't have one of these, get one. No kitchen should be without this. This is such a time saver and a disaster preventer. It's not even funny. There's some very expensive ones out there. Mine is, this one costs about $55. It's a lava tool. This is the Javelin Pro. It's about $55 on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description where I put the recipe. Get yourself one and use my link, please. It won't cost you anymore, and it'll get you right to where you need to go. So we're going to cut into this puppy. It's been cooling here for a while, and see what it is. It's very crusty on top. I'm going to get rid of this parchment because it rattles. I should show you the bottom. Looks good. Looks good, eh? Maybe I'm Canadian with all the A. Oh, look at that. It's got a nice crumb to it. It's pretty dense. I don't know. My thinking was I wish it had been a little, better together. So I think next time I make this, I gotta try it. I might put it in a loaf pan, but I don't know. Or elongate the loaf. Can't really decide. I have to think about it. Ooh. This is still a little hot. I think we'll try cutting this piece because I'm butchering that one. Yeah, it's crusty. Let me just add that in there. It is crusty, but it is going to be delicious. Ooh, look at that. I do love a crusty bread. A little hair. Oh yeah, I'm glad I put some salt in there because it is very bland. Next time I think I'll put a little more. But anyway, there you have it. Tuscan bread. Homemade in my kitchen. So I thank you for joining me and hanging around to the end. Please subscribe. I really appreciate it. And we'll continue adventuring down, the cooking lane and see what we can come up with next. So join me next time at Cooking Homemade with Jill. Thank you. Take care.